Welcome to How to Win an Oscar with a Fully Remote Creative Team, an intimate discussion with the creative team behind the instant holiday classic, The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse. We thank sponsor Lucid Link for their support.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for not only coming to NAB, but coming to this great session with a fabulous panel. The session's entitled, How to Win an Oscar with a Fully Remote Creative Team, featuring two of the instrumental creatives from the award-winning animation film, The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse. The Boy, the Mole, and the Fox, and the Horse debuted in December 2022 on the BBC network with over 7 million live viewers. This animated short film is destined to be a Christmastime classic. It's not only won a BAFTA award, 4 Annies, the coveted animation awards, but recently won the Academy Award for the Best Animated Short Film. First of all, I want to give a shout out to our UK channel partner, Jigsaw 24, who first signed up None More Productions as a Lucid Link client, really not knowing that this project was destined for fame. For those of you wondering about the technical applications used in the film, I'll give you a little insight. Nuke was used for comping alongside After Effects, Adobe Bridge for the color script. Specifically, all the characters were animated in TV Paint, while the backgrounds were all painted in Adobe Photoshop. Editing was done using DaVinci Resolve and Avid Media Composer. It has been my honor to work with Ben Wood and Mike McCain, part of the creative team. I'd first like to introduce Mike McCain. On my far left, Mike is an art director and visual development artist. He's based in LA. Since 2019, he has focused on his passion for painting and animation art and has worked with a variety of studios, including Sony, Netflix, DreamWorks, Axis, None More, and Disney TV. His credits include Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, The Ghost and Molly McGee, and most recently art directing the animation adaptation of The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse. I'd also like to welcome to the stage my friend Ben Wood. Ben is the Senior Support Specialist with over 9 years of experience in the visual effects industry. Ben's based in London and most recently has been solely responsible for the IT needs of an Academy Award-winning production called The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse. Having worked at major VFX studios including Smoke and Mirrors, DNEG, and most recently None More Productions, Ben has been accredited with several productions, including Dunkirk, Tenet, Black Mirror, and Chernobyl, to name a few. To top it off, our moderator is Lucid Link's own Dave Leopold. Dave has served as an editor, motion graphics artist, producer, post-supervisor, and nearly everything in between in media and entertainment. Over the past 2 decades, he has worked with some of the biggest names in television, most recently at Paramount, where he has created all types of content, including the 2014 documentary feature, REM by MTV. In his current role at Lucid Link, Dave brings remote collaboration solutions to the global creative community, and his ultimate goal is to ensure that creatives are spending their time being creative. So with that, I want to tell you that Lucid Link is thrilled to bring you the behind-the-scenes look at how this Academy Award-winning film was made entirely remotely with over 120 creatives in over 15 countries and done entirely on Lucid Link. So with that, here's a great panel for you.
Thanks, Julie. Can we play the reel?
What do you dream about?
Home.
What's that like?
I don't know, but I know I need one.
So, what are we doing?
We're on a quest for cake.
Well, let's get going then.
You are loved. And you bring to this world things that no one else can.
Whoa! What's the bravest thing you've ever said?
Help. Asking for help isn't giving up. It's refusing to give up.
I never get tired of seeing that. So I'm really excited to be here today talking to both of you. Thank you both for being here. I was a huge fan of the original book written by Charlie Mackesy that this film was based on, of the same name, The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse. To anyone who hasn't read that or seen the film yet, I encourage you to do it. It's truly beautiful, it's emotional, and it's something that really sticks with you.
And it's streaming on Apple TV+.
Yes, it is. So I want to start with just what your backgrounds are and how you found your way to this project. Ben, can you talk a little bit about that?
I'm originally from the northeast of England, Newcastle to be exact, and I studied film and television at university. Eventually moved down to London and started as a post house runner in Soho. Kind of worked my way up through the ranks. I tried quite a few different departments before I landed in IT. I tried my hand at editing, production, a little bit of sound design, and eventually ended up as an assistant engineer at a company called Smoke and Mirrors. After that, I moved on to a bigger VFX studio called Double Negative, now DNEG. Really learned the business there, IT-wise. Worked there for about 5 years, working on like a multitude of different big films, big TV shows, and then eventually moved across to the parent company, Freud Communications, which was the beginning of Non-More Productions in my time on The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse.
That's great. Mike?
Yeah, so my background is in video game development, actually. I was a game director for about a decade up in Seattle. Loved our game studio there, but around 2019, I felt like, I think it's time for a change. And so my wife and I ended up moving down to Los Angeles to pursue animation, and I really wanted to get back to painting and doing animation art. So I did that for a couple years, and then I got a cold email from Cara Speller. She was our producer on the film. She'd seen some of my work on ArtStation, and she saw, I think, something that could be a fit with with Charlie's beautiful art from the original book, and so we started talking.
And had either of you been aware of the book before the animated version was proposed to you?
I hadn't heard of the book before. I decided to leave Double Negative, and I got in contact with recruiters and kind of began that quest to find a new job. And I landed at the company I did, and the story unfolded, and I came to learn about the book and Charlie Mackesy and the amazing story that it is. And so it all kind of unraveled as I joined the company and began to meet my teammates and all that kind of stuff.
I really hadn't heard of the book either, which is sort of incredible now, because I feel like now that I know it, I see it everywhere. Yeah, Cara mentioned it. I couldn't wait for them to send me a copy, so I went on YouTube and looked up. Somebody was reading it out loud and sort of showing the pictures to the camera. But it was actually a really charming way to be introduced to the film or the book. Sorry. Now it's a film. It really struck a chord, and my wife saw the book too and said, "Oh my gosh, that mole is adorable. You have to work on this." Yeah.
Yeah, so the book made a huge splash. It had a very broad reader base. I think sold out. You couldn't get your hands on a copy after a little while. And now with the film, it's reaching even more people, which I think is fantastic. More people are becoming aware of it. They're enjoying the messages. So first, congratulations. Congratulations on just an amazing film, all the awards. You know, when you look at this, did you ever think that it was going to be as big as it is?
Not really. I mean, it's a difficult one because it was already a success. It was an amazing story. Charlie's an amazing artist, but I couldn't tell how many people it would reach and the success it went on to have. Once the artwork started coming in month after month, then we started seeing the film kind of grow. It became more and more obvious that we had something quite special on our hands.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say I felt about the same. Like, especially coming in, this was a very new experience for me to art direct a film like this. And I think with any adaptation of something, of a book, especially something that's so beloved as Charlie's book has become, I think there's always that sort of initial trepidation of like, is this something that we're going to be tackling in a way that's going to successfully take the core of what makes the book special and put it on screen. But I think, to Cara and Peter Bankton, our director, to their credit, like pretty much as soon as I saw some of the early story animatics and storyboards, I thought, they were really on the right track, and I was just excited and hopeful that we'd make it through the whole thing and stick the landing. And I think.
So I think that this film really marks a milestone. It most recently won, as Julie said, the Academy Award for Best Short Animated Film. And what's really so special about this award in particular is this is likely the first film that has gotten an Oscar for a production that was completely remote. This is not just, this may be the first time that it happens, but it's certainly not going to be the last time. Mm-hmm. And so the way that you worked and the way this whole production functioned to create this film, you were sort of writing the playbook for remote productions to come. So I'd like to dig in a little bit into how everyone came together. Ben, can we just sort of start with how many people were working on the film, how many countries?
So at the beginning of the process for me, I joined the company around about 2 or 3 months into production. They'd already gone through the early stages, creating the storyboards, the initial meetings, the voiceovers were already recorded. Once I joined, the rough infrastructure was already there, and we had around about 50 users working remotely all over the world, Europe, America, Canada, Australia. And that steadily grew to a size just over 120 in total. But people dropped away along the way. Some people were on contract for 3 months, 6 months. I was permanent, Mike was permanent. The production staff were as well. But around about 120 in total over the whole course of the film.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so being in charge of so much of the technology, what were the challenges in getting everyone on the same page technically?
So first off, within the first couple of weeks of joining the company, I had to assess who are we, how many are there, what systems do they have at home, what's their user ability, and most importantly, what's their bandwidth, because we were still deep in the COVID pandemic at this point. So bandwidth was very important. Would I be able to remotely assist them while they were on the machine at the same time? These kind of questions. Very early on, I kind of identified users who had amazing ability creatively, but may not have had the best machines at home. I think in about 2 or 3 cases, people had to buy new iMacs because they couldn't support the latest OSs and that kind of stuff. So they were the first kind of challenges I had to face on my side of things.
And Mike, as far as the different creative applications that were being used. It was a pretty broad range. How did you make sure that people of such different abilities and experience, who you couldn't necessarily sit next to and coach, how did you make sure they were all on the same page?
Yeah, I mean, the remote aspect of leading this kind of team was incredibly daunting. I think for the art department, we're responsible for laying out and painting the world of the film. So we basically produce all the background art, and so the trick with that is, I think the first several months of the production were sort of trying to hone in our painting style for the film, how we were taking the essence of Charlie's beautiful art and translating that onto the big screen, sort of, how, like, what kind of brushes we were using in Photoshop, like where we would use ink line versus more watercolor techniques, and sort of figuring all that out, and then at the same time trying to familiarize the other artists on the team with that technique. We did a lot of, like, early on we did some Zoom demos, like I would just kind of show the paintings that we had already established and do some quick sketches in Photoshop to show them kind of how to approach it. But yeah, there was a lot of moving parts, and it's sort of the early phases of production always feel like you're kind of laying the track for the train, like 1 or 2 panels ahead of the train. But yeah, we got through it, and to the credit of our team is incredibly talented, and they picked it up, and by the end of production, we were like, we had a lot of momentum, and that was really exciting to see.
And I would imagine that because it is such a distinct style of illustration, of animation, first of all, translating watercolor into a moving image has its own challenges. But when you think about the fact that you're doing sort of a very distinct style, you're doing it with a range of technical applications, and you're doing it across distances, what was that like to try and bring everyone into the same vision? Did you have review sessions over Zoom where you critique things?
Yeah, so in animation, we usually have more or less daily reviews with the team. So for the background painters, I was one of the most westward people on the team, so I'd be waking up at like 6 or 7 in the morning and hoping my coffee would kick in before I got too deep into reviews. And basically looking at each artist's work, we'd chat about where they were at, do quick little paint-overs. One tool we had, I'll just mention, usually when you're working with a team in an office environment, or I guess usually doesn't really apply anymore, but in the past, pre-pandemic, you'd have a lot of art up on the walls, you'd have like your color script for the film, and everybody can sort of refer to this shared vision in a physical space. And so one of the ways that we approached that on this project was using Adobe Bridge, just because it was a fast way to lay out like all the major shots that we were working on and see like the color and composition progression across these shots. So this was a quick way for me to work with the art team and say, hey, you're working on this shot over here. This is what comes before and after it. For animation, there's a program, there's other things that you use for that as well. But one thing, since we're talking about Lucid Link, we had some really, really big files, probably like 200 or 300 shots in the film, and I was able to just sort of have all these previews come up seamlessly on my computer, on the art team's computers, and on my screen share. And they could update something on there, and then a minute later, I'd have it on my screen share. So I'm not going to say that was all working like day one when I was putting all that together, but once we had all that kind of figured out, it was a really powerful tool for me to for all of us to just kind of keep our eyes on the big picture progression of the backgrounds in the film.
So I think when you talk about a production that is fully remote, especially animation, where animators are used to working closely together, they can look over each other's shoulders, there had to be some sort of leap of faith as you moved into this process. Ben, can you talk a little bit about what it was like to really get started, get everyone on the same technology, no matter where they were in the world?
Yeah, I mean, as I said before, making a detailed list of all departments, their requirements, their connection ability, the bandwidth that they had at home, the machines. Once that kind of stuff got out of the way, it was then a case of putting out fires daily, and making that decision. Well, Lucid Link was already in place, and I've got to say it took a lot of pressure off of my shoulders, because onboarding people and taking them through the folder structure was a breeze, whereas previously at different companies you may have had half of your storage at the facility, not easily got into, and you may have had other data elsewhere. But this time, it was a first. We had everything all in the same place, all with the same folder structure. People could work on files at the same time, simultaneously. So for me, it was just a case of finding my feet and the whole production kind of cohesively working together and just kind of finding our rhythm and putting one step in front of the other, to quote the film.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'll just say, when Julie was introducing us, she was talking about your mission statement, David, of allowing creatives to have the space to be creative, and I feel like I feel like that's a huge part of what I saw in your work on the film as well, Ben, and just in having the technology in place for us, I'm routinely working with Photoshop files that are 3, 4, 5 gigabytes big, and I need other people on the team to be able to open those, edit them, save them back out. So
being alone, I was solely responsible for all the IT needs. Yeah. I did have a team of other IT specialists, but they were all based at the parent company, which was a PR facility. So they weren't really naturally knowledgeable on VFX workflows, animation studios, the needs and the wants of the crew and the production. So I did have to learn quickly and put out fires very quickly and kind of just assess what do we need, how quickly do we need it, what are the priorities, and Lucid Link really took a lot off my shoulders pressure-wise, which was much needed.
Which let you take more things off of our shoulders.
Yes, yeah, and I'm not going to get stressed and jaded,
right,
etc.
So as you paved this path, though, it would be great if everything worked perfectly and smoothly right out of the gate. What were a couple of the challenges that came up along the way that you really had to solve?
Again, talking about people's machines, really. I mean, in the first couple of months, 8 to 9 months in, we were it was plain sailing. We got rid of all of those initial problems and identified, sticky situations with bandwidth and machines that were just past their best. And once we got through that kind of side of things, it was a case of just refining our workflow and our pipeline, having these daily meetings, as Mike said. And one thing that I thought was really helpful was having a weekly meeting, which I was included in, where I could actually see the work unfolding. I could put names to faces. I also had to work with Charlie a lot as well, who's notoriously a bit of a technophobe. So I had to assist him as well quite often, getting confused with what machine was what and connections and all this kind of stuff. But yeah, once we put out those fires, it was a case of just nailing down our processes and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me that you say he's a little bit of a technophobe.
Yeah.
His style is just so organic and analog. I
Yeah.
mean, everything is not only hand drawn and painted, but even the writing, the text
Yeah.
is hand done. What was it like to try and have to recreate that style, and especially, you know, the text in the book is such a big part of it. How do you translate that into the characters and the movement and, you know, backgrounds?
Yeah, I mean, I think, so when I came on, Peter and the team were already pretty far in developing the look of the characters with that beautiful sort of hand-drawn ink line that they were animating frame by frame. And so, you know, that already took a lot of development, and I know one of the big problems they had to wrestle with is, if you're familiar with the book, the character of the boy is really sort of there as a stand-in for the audience. You know, you can put yourself in the boy's shoes. So because of that, when he draws the boy in the book, we're almost always sort of at a distance, or we're over the shoulder, or we're sort of sharing his view. We don't really get to see a close-up of this character's face. So right there was a big problem for the character team to figure out, is how do you basically do this in a way that still feels true to the book, even though you never saw it in the book. So I think there was a lot of kind of like problem solving like that early on. And then on the background painting side, it was really all about how do we stay true to the essence of the world that Charlie's describing in his sketches without feeling like we're trying to exactly recreate the look of the book on the screen, because they're two very different mediums, and we wanted this, you know, we wanted to take the world that the book puts in your mind and try to put that on the screen. So it was a lot of like studying how Charlie works, and then mixing that with, you know, more. We looked at a lot of reference of Northumberland, actually, where Charlie grew up, where Ben grew up, which is the inspiration for the landscapes in the film. So we did a lot of like lighting studies and just trying to capture the essence of those locations.
That was something I noticed instantly when seeing the artwork for the first time. It clearly was based in the region I'm from originally, and I actually got a chance to talk to Charlie early on, and he called out my accent and was like, "You're Northern, where are you from?" And it was obvious he must have grown up there, because it looks like that at winter time, and that was something that I found fascinating immediately. He'd captured it, and then the team went on to elaborate and extend on that. It was an interesting point I found.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we're talking so much about the artwork. I'd love to take a look at some of them and hear some of your insights.
Let's see if this magic button.
There we go.
Hey, it works. Yeah, so we're just going to flip through some, we've got a bunch of images here that kind of show off the environments and the look of the film. We did a lot of studies of these beautiful oak trees that you see in that throughout all over England, really, but especially in the north there.
Yeah.
To try to get these trees feeling as like.
I think Charlie's from Hexham originally, which is like bang in the middle of Northumberland and Cumbria. I don't know if you've ever seen the film Robin Hood, the Prince of Thieves. It's that set. The opening is near Hadrian's Wall. Which is just, it looks like this at wintertime. It's clear to see.
Yeah, Charlie clearly has like a very deep understanding of form in nature and a love for this environment. And so when it came to like designing these trees, this was really, it was really challenging, but really rewarding too. I think ultimately, finding how to present these in the film came less from like when we just tried to draw like how Charlie draws or sort of mimic one of his drawings, we'd end up with a lesser version of one of his drawings. But then, we started to really try to see these trees and see this world the same way he does. And, like I'd go out and do studies of different types of trees, but it all kind of fed into this understanding of the world that I think we could then put on screen with a little bit more confidence.
And so when specifically with the trees, you said that you really did you studied the trees, tried to figure out, their form. Were you watching Charlie in his process as he would draw some of these trees? Because the film is far more detailed than the book. There's certainly some detail around those trees, but was it more just adapting his style to what you studied, or was it specifically trying to see how he does it?
I think a little bit of both. I mean, so the really interesting thing about Charlie's ink work in the book, and I think what allows his images to really resonate and reach millions of people is like they're deceptively simple. So they're these very loose gestural ink drawings, but the detail and the specificity of place that he captures in every drawing is, like, those drawings are actually loaded with information. It's just all very implied and gestural. And so I think a lot of it, for me at least, was trying to really pick up on all of that and soak it in from his drawings, and then to capture that more concretely on screen.
And when we look at the fox here, we see there's lines, additional lines. The watercolor, as it's filled in, doesn't always go to the edge. What was it like to try and really capture that?
I mean, that was a huge challenge. The animation team, we had an absolutely incredible team of ink artists. They'd do these ink keys, and then they'd basically ink over the final pencil animations for the characters frame by frame to achieve this really fluid ink line. In the art department, we were sort of always in awe of like how fluid these characters were, and just trying to put them against backgrounds that would really showcase their performances and do them justice. So and this is actually a good slide because you can see how we started to introduce some more subtle ink work on the tree to sort of marry the style together, but without being too overpowering, right? Like, we want the characters to be the strongest point of contrast and the clear focus. They're the stars of the story.
This shot in particular is what I was talking about. This you really captured that kind of rolling landscape with these kind of lone trees. Like this shows it off perfectly.
Yeah, if you look in the distance there, I think you can see Ben's house.
Yeah. Hey, Mom.
But yeah, we've got more slides here. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, let's go through a couple more. So this is a still that was basically taken directly from the book. Now, the movie as a whole is an expanded story. There's additional things in it that weren't necessarily in the book. How closely were you trying to match the things that it did have in common? So shots like this.
Very, very, very closely. I think that's something that Peter and Charlie and Kara were working on kind of from the start. It's definitely not like every shot in the book is translated into the film, but there's these very sort of like powerful touchstone moments in the book that I think they knew from the start that we wanted to try to adapt. And so, like, compositionally, some stuff is still shifting here, but you're absolutely right. Like, the story of the book frame is pretty much translated one-to-one into the film, which was really exciting to see.
I also love that because it's whimsical, because there's sort of extra lines, sort of sketch, the color is not always exactly placed. It's this very sort of imprecise but more organic.
I think it brings it
way.
to life.
Absolutely.
The imperfectness of the characters. That's what
Yeah.
I thought.
That's absolutely right. And it turns out that's harder to do than more precise work, because you have to sort of control the chaos enough. And sometimes the tools encourage you to be neater.
I remember hearing in Daly's meetings quite a few times where some of the artists had not been imperfect and having to be reminded, do have a patch of orange here into the fox's face. And I just remember hearing that. I thought it was quite interesting to be told to be incorrect or imprecise.
Yeah.
But it worked. It worked in the end.
What was it like to try to bring to life something that was so personal to the original creator? I've read that the animals are sort of representations of different parts of Charlie, and these are very, very near and dear to him, and he's much of an introvert, and so this is sort of how he was expressing himself. He must have had very specific wants and desires as far as how it was going to be represented as he gave control over to other people.
Yeah, I mean, I think I definitely had to learn sort of and this is true of every project, you learn sort of where someone's preferences are, like what kind of things are resonating with them. I think for Charlie, the thing is, like, he always had really strong visual instincts. He just, especially early on, didn't always know the right, terminology or sort of like how we would achieve that visual instinct in animation, because he's very experienced with art, but he was relatively new to the animation industry specifically. So I think that was the main part of it with him, was just as we'd get into it, we'd learn sort of what's he looking for, and then figure out sort of, well, how do we get to that point, or what are we doing that isn't hitting that? It was that kind of back and forth. But one thing, in particular, is he would always hit, you can see the shadows here are really, they're very bright blue, and that was something I think that, when I talk about his visual instincts, he has all these, very vivid memories, I think, from childhood of, when there's a bright, sunny day and everything's covered with snow, you get these really rich shadows. And so early on, I'd be kind of timid with color, and he'd just be like, no, punch that blue way up, and it would make the image better every time.
These are gorgeous. I love looking at them. Was there any specific sequence or scene that you felt was more challenging or unexpectedly challenging as you came across it?
There was one sequence that I remember was a big challenge to render. I think it led to some of the render farm.
So earlier you said some of the challenges I faced, and I forgot in the moment, but now I've remembered. About halfway through my time on the production, everything was hitting all at once. I was getting us moved into a new studio in the east of London. Because of the pandemic restrictions started to lay off, we could actually get back to work. The contractors finished building the studio for us, for whoever wanted to come in, if they lived near London or in London. And I also had to build an edit suite with perfect as possible UHD playback, and build a render farm for our Nuke compositors, and fix a broken render farm. We had a third-party coding company help us write some scripts to allow our TV Paint files to be inputted into particular folders on LucidLink. And of course, that kept breaking every single day. And it got to the point where the deadlines were looming, and it was all on me to kind of keep us working and get rid of these stoppages, and there were a few. I can't remember. I think it was Boy 125, which I particularly
it was
hated
some of Flight
for a while.
maybe too.
Yeah.
There's a big flight sequence and towards the end.
They would just keep fail because they were quite long shots, I believe.
Yeah.
I can't remember how long they actually were in the film, but they kept breaking the scripts all the time. So in the end, I just had to bite the bullet and do them manually, which I kept a secret. I only just told Mike about this like 40 minutes ago. I kept it quiet because shouldn't really have to do that, be a data wrangler as well as supporting everyone, but you know, those deadlines weren't going away. So I just, I would utilize machines we weren't using and basically spin plates and have like one shot manually rendering, and I'd teach myself the TV Paint software. So we got over the line in the end, but I think everyone from the artists to the producers, even the accountants, me, we all had those stressful moments, like wanting to pull our hair out and sleepless nights, but we came out with a gorgeous film in the end, so.
Yeah. I think one of the fun things about working on a 2D animated film like this is you tend to have more static shots, right? Like a lot of shots where we can paint a background, and that's basically the frame and the composition of the shot. So maybe that's like 80% of our shots, and those are pretty relatively straightforward shots to render.
Yeah.
And then every one of the other shots that has like a dramatic camera move or like a projection to get the ground to feel like it's in perspective properly, like any shot that's like sort of not following that format just becomes like way more complicated to
in the end, we
solve.
We had to cut up some of the bigger shots so they were in smaller chunks, so that this basic render farm could the script so it wouldn't crash it. I kind of identified that if the job ran for longer than 3 or 4 hours, there was a chance something would log out, or the machine would, overheat, or something would happen. So I just became extremely scared the longer the shots were, and just working with the team and just kind of relaying everything back all the time. Just don't be scared to say, this shot in particular keeps failing and failing. Don't keep it a secret all the time. Yeah.
And I have to imagine that, it's a little counterintuitive, but how hard it must be to do snow everywhere when, it's white, and many of these frames, it looks like, snow is taking up most of the frame.
Yeah.
What are the challenges there?
I mean, the nice thing is, like, Charlie has a very minimal art style in the book, so a big part of that is that the snowy world kind of feels like a blank canvas when you're painting in watercolor, which I'm no good at, but you can often use a lot of the white of your page in the final painting for anything that basically doesn't need to receive shadow or contouring. So I think it became a powerful statement. I think that it's an intentional choice of Charlie's too in the book to have that sort of negative space around them and to really sort of isolate the characters against this vast wilderness that they're in. So yeah, I mean, it was a lot of fun. The biggest challenge is probably like you're always trying to indicate form as subtly as you can, because the snow is really sensitive to like whether it feels like it's being lit or in shadow. And but it's really fun. I love having that much like negative space to work with.
Well, I also love that the negative space does spotlight the characters.
Exactly.
But it's not empty space. The negative space fills the frame so that it feels full.
Yeah.
This shot in particular, just while we're on it, I don't think the team will mind us discussing this, but this was quite a tricky shot decision-wise, because the boy, if I'm correct, if I'm wrong, this is actually Charlie's penmanship. This is, did he actually draw this shot?
He might have redrawn it for the film, but it's basically a still from the film, the character drawing here.
Yeah.
Or, from the book, sorry, I keep on saying book.
Because I remember hearing that, like, the boy, he actually changes. Like, I noticed the style kind of changes as he jumps and he falls off the horse. And I heard that Charlie may have actually...
Yeah, the characters are his drawing.
Yeah, I thought that was
so this one is one of the most literally adapted straight from the book scenes in the film.
Beautiful.
This is one of my favorites. Jenny, you painted this one.
It's really wonderful to see how lifelike some of this minimal artistry becomes. So as you look at the entire process, first of all, how long was the entire production?
I think it was just over 2 years, if you count right from the very, very beginning. Our production manager, Cara Speller, Delphi Lithgow, her second producer. I think that they were initially, the very first steps. I mean, it could even, about 2.5 years, would you say?
I think that their conversations began pre-pandemic.
Yeah, and then obviously hitting the pandemic and that putting everyone back, production-wise, all of us, But yeah, around 2.5 years, and then once we had the teams in place, I think 2 years, like working from end to end.
And on a production like this, like most people, depending on your department, like there's storyboard artists much earlier in production, and then I came on after there'd already been several months of storyboards and character designs and animation tests. Built up the art department through 2021, and then I think even more like compositing artists come on later in production, as some of the art department was like ramping out. We wrapped up basically background painting at the end of 2021, although through 2021. And then through 2022, we had a lot of basically getting the rest of the film, getting the film together, fixing a lot of things like in the background painting still, in the renders.
Painstaking, backwards and forwards. That's why I had to build that edit suite quickly so they could review on ultra high definition TVs and make sure that all the pixels were correct.
Right.
The edges of the characters.
Which we did not always catch when we were working on it.
Yeah, I think that sent the editor and Cara Speller like slowly insane. Just kind of looking so closely at every single detail. But that's what it takes. But that's where a lot of the pressure came from me to make sure that edit suite is in place. And in play, I had to move all that equipment myself. Like some Bright Spark didn't think it would be good to have a removals team, so I actually had to do that. And I'm pretty sure that's giving me sciatica, having to carry those TVs on my own. But yeah, that level of scrutiny was key. And then rendering shots and re-rendering shots. And once the render farm was underway, then we could really churn these shots out as and when needed.
Yeah, well, especially considering that you said that they started talking about this pre-pandemic, I'm just so glad to see that it didn't get shelved, because a lot of productions were being shelved while they were figuring out how do we continue to work. And it sounds like there may have been a little bit of a pause, but there was always the intention to continue moving forward.
Yeah, I don't know the details of like sort of those early days, but at least by the time I came on, I felt like Cara and the production team had really embraced the remote production of the film as a strength and as a unique opportunity where suddenly they were perhaps able to work with a much more global team and to sort of have this opportunity to really, go fully remote and fully global with the team.
So, in general, when you look back at your experience, what was the biggest takeaway that you had during the entire production that you think you might bring with you to the next project?
Well, for me, believing in myself and there's always a way through. You can always find a solution. I think one really big takeaway for me was I'd never really worked completely on my own, department-wise, like that before. I did have another bunch of colleagues in a different facility, but they weren't in the same world as me. So there were issues like building a render farm, building edit suites that they'd never done before. Like I was the specialist, I was the top dog on those decisions. During the course of the production, I had to just kind of find out coping strategies, and one of my main ones was make sure you've got a tight contact base. And I've got to throw out some names: Alex Ferris from LucidLink, and Ruben Watson, a whole load of guys from Jigsaw, and just making sure that I had specialist knowledge that I could dip into. And that was a big takeaway for me. You don't have to be an expert in every single field. It's impossible to be, it's impossible to know everything, basically. And that was my takeaway. Just it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to say, I need help.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure where to begin, even. I mean, it was, I think, like Ben said, it was a big learning experience, and there was a lot of firsts for me on this as well. And I think it was especially kind of hard to separate from the experience of the pandemic itself, to be honest, for all of us. But I think one of the things I really valued from the opportunity was, just getting to meet so many people from around the world that I wouldn't have otherwise met, and getting to sort of hang out. Peter and Charlie and Kara were good about having like a weekly meeting with the whole team to share work, share updates, and then within our individual teams, we got to work together a lot. So I think just like the community of making the film was
It was special.
Yeah, it was special, and
special.
I think it shows in the results.
Yeah.
Hopefully,
It was, every week, people almost in tears and stuff. Charlie was in tears quite often. I remember getting emotional a few times. It's
For sure.
It definitely felt quite unusual coming out of the pandemic, and the morals of the film and the book as well. Like it felt special throughout.
Yeah, I think that the book really gave people sort of a roadmap for self-exploration and improvement and just learning how to live life a little bit differently. And then by the time the film came around, I think that because of the pandemic, it touched people in a different way. And it's just been really special for me to have seen the book, seen what happened with the film, see how it evolved. And I really appreciate you both taking the time to talk to us. I do want to mention both Ben and Mike will be at the LucidLink booth at 4 o'clock to do some Q&A. If you had some questions, feel free to stop by there. And I think we're actually going to raffle off a few copies of the book as well. But again, Ben, Mike, congratulations on an extraordinary film. And for sharing your insight. Thank you for sharing your insights with us.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.